This is Winchester Academy.
Thank you. All right, that was quite an introduction. I've never had a demonstration before I've given a talk. All right, can you hear me? Is that all right? Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me to come talk about Homo Naledi. As Terry mentioned, I just turned in my dissertation this morning. Oh my gosh, thank you. What a relief. So I am all about Homo Naledi right now, and I love telling this story because it is such an interesting story about how this species was discovered in the Rising Star Cave and how this species was studied over the past 3 years. This is really changing the idea of hominins and how we study hominins in the field of paleoanthropology, and it's a really fun story to tell. So I'm just going to dive right in. Discovered in a deep, dark cave, there were over 2,000 bones that represent 15 individuals, from infants to the elderly and everyone in between. And these bones that were discovered in the Rising Star Cave system demonstrate an unexpected combination of traits. They look like humans in some ways, and they look like other hominin species in other ways. They look like apes in some ways. It is a really, really interesting mix of traits that we have never seen before in the hominin fossil record. So I am going to be talking about these individuals today, and this is Homo Naledi. It really all starts with Dr. Lee Berger. Lee Berger is known for discovering Australopithecus sediba. This is a species of Australopithecus that lived around 2 million years ago. Lee Berger and his son were walking in, so they live in Johannesburg. And they were walking around in the cradle of humankind. The cradle of humankind has been very productive for hominin bones. So they were walking in the cradle, and his son, this is the discovery of Australopithecus sediba, his son literally walks and just like picks up a hominin bone. He's just like walking around and he's like, "Dad, what is this?" And he's found another species, 2 million years old. This is Australopithecus sediba. And so Lee Berger was known for finding this species, and they published on it in 2010. And in 2013, he was convinced that the cradle of humankind still had hominin species in it. It had been very productive in the past. Many famous hominin fossils have been discovered in the cradle of humankind. It is a World Heritage Site because of it. A lot of people travel to the cradle of humankind to visit these very famous sites. But over the past 10 years, it seemed like it was drying up. It seemed like there weren't as many big hominin discoveries. And a lot of paleoanthropologists thought that maybe we had found all of them. You know, we kind of hit our limit. And Lee Berger refused to believe this. He thought that there had to be more hominin fossils, and we just weren't looking in the right place. So he hired a team of cavers, and he wanted them to systematically explore all of the caves in the cradle of humankind. And fortunately, there's a really large caving community in Johannesburg because there are so many limestone caves in the cradle of humankind. It's filled with them. And so there's a really strong caving community. Lee Berger reached out to them and he said, "Hey, I'm gonna pay you for something that you do on the weekends anyways. But when you are down in the caves, if you find any bones, if you find animal bones, whatever, if you think that you found bones, take a picture and send them to me. Just send them to me, and I will pay for your weekend excursions." And little did he know that within a month, they had discovered the Rising Star cave system, and they had discovered the Homo naledi fossils. So these are the two cavers. This is Steve Tucker and Rick Hunter, and they were the two cavers that went into the Rising Star cave system and went all the way down into the chamber and discovered the bones. So we are going to hear a little bit more about their experience in the caves.
Caving has always been great. Caving, you want to answer that question of what's around the next corner. That's like always the question you want to know. It's mostly fueled by curiosity. But as you get into caving more and more, the scientific side of it comes into it. You want to know, how did these places form? What happened here millions of years ago? What happened here billions of years ago? Basically, it creates a fascination with this whole environment. In my wildest dreams, I would never have thought that caving would take me to what's happening here. You could almost call this a bit of an accident. So my caving buddy and me, Rick, we were out exploring this cave on a Friday night. We'd gone into a very remote section of the cave, part that I'd never been in before. And in that section, well, we stumbled upon fossils. Yeah, at first we didn't exactly know what fossils yet. We started looking around a bit more until we found a mandible, and that was when we knew this was probably hominid. That was when we got excited about it.
So these are the initial pictures that they showed to Lee. As you can see, this is the head. This is the skull. This is the covering over the brain, and it looks very much like our skull. And then they also found just a lot of bones on the surface here. It was just the surface of the chamber was just littered with bones. And so they showed these pictures to Lee, and Lee was like, yes, these are hominins, or these are humans. And he immediately came up with a project, and he applied for money, and he thought that there was going to be 1 or 2 skeletons in here. He was like, okay, I think we're going to need a month-long excavation, and he planned the entire project based on his idea that there was going to be 1 or 2 hominin skeletons in this cave. So he posted on Facebook, as we all do these days. Facebook and Twitter are the main platforms of social media in biological anthropology, so this made sense. Basically, he posted this. Dear colleagues, I need the help of the whole community and for you to reach out to as many related professional groups as possible. And he goes on to this this description. They need excellent archaeological and paleontological and excavation skills. The catch is, this person must be skinny and preferably small. They must not be claustrophobic. They must be fit. They should probably have some caving experience, as you could see in that video, right? They are going through some really skinny crevices. Climbing experience would be a bonus. And they must be willing to work in cramped quarters, have a good attitude, be a team player. And so out of the 57 applicants that applied for this, 6 women were chosen based on their caving skills, well, their size, but also based on their caving skills, excavation skills, and the fact that they were able to drop everything and just go to South Africa and work for a month, right? A lot of people obviously don't have that luxury, but these women did, and so these were the women that were considered our underground astronauts. And they were the ones that excavated the Homo naledi material outside of the chamber. This is our very own Dr. Leah Gertov. She just graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So we're proud of her. All right, so we are going to go on a tour through this cave system just like they would, and just like they did every single day for a month during their excavation. It took about 20 minutes to get from the outside of the cave all the way down into the chamber. Their route was about 20 minutes. Throughout the entire route, there were safety harnesses and everything throughout the entire route. Also, the experienced cavers like Steve and Rick were there the entire time. They would go with the excavators into the cave, and they would also follow them out. So safety was the #1 priority. And they made sure to keep the excavators and also the cavers safe. All right, so that was the opening. This is just a schematic of the cave itself. It's pretty simplified, but this shows you all of the interesting points. So we have the entrances here. We have this area called the Superman's Crawl, which is less than 10 inches high. This is why there was that size issue. Superman's Crawl. You know how Superman flies through the sky? You got to shimmy through that cave and squeeze in an area that is 10 inches high. And then climb up Dragon's Back and then into the chute, which is where the Naledi chamber is. And this was the fossil site here in the chamber. All right, so let's go through this route with them. Here we enter the cave. This is the entry point, one of few. There's another entry point here. This is the only area that I went into in the cave. I don't really fit anywhere else. But yeah, this is a beautiful entryway here. And then we get to this chamber here, which is very beautiful, has a lot of stalactites, stalagmites, very cave-like. Is exactly what you would imagine for any good South African cave. And then you get through Superman's Crawl, and you have to climb up Dragon's Back. As you can see, there's a person here with a headlamp. And then we have this rope here that's for safety measures. They kind of hung on to the rope while they're climbing up Dragon's Back because there are steep drops on either side. So, and then, if that wasn't hard enough, they have to shimmy down this chute here, which is actually the narrowest point of the cave. Not even this one, but this chute, they have to kind of shimmy down, and then it opened up into the Naledi chamber. And you can see someone down here with the headlamp looking up. So that is the bottom of the chamber. It's not that long of a chute, but it certainly is tight. And then this is what the chamber looked like. So here are 2 excavators. And this is the main site of where all of the fossils were discovered. We called this site the puzzle box. So this chamber is not very big, and the whole time they really had to be kind of crouched over. They took their shoes off so that they didn't step on any bones. It was also quite warm in there, and so taking the shoes off was a little refreshing, maybe. So this is what it was like to excavate in this chamber here. And they are working on, I think, that skull. All right, and it does require the skills of a contortionist sometimes. What was really important during this entire excavation process was being able to kind of 3D scan this puzzle box while they were excavating. So in the puzzle box, remember that picture that they showed Lee Berger? We could see that outline of the skull. They initially went to that and they did a detailed excavation of that skull and brought out the skull. People really like skulls in our field. We definitely want a face to the species, right? We're nothing without a face. So we really focused on that skull, and then below the skull was the puzzle box, and it was called the puzzle box because it looked like a box with like a bunch of puzzle pieces that you have to like get apart in order to lay them on the table to get your corners, you know. So the bones were like this, and you had to remove this bone to get at this bone, and it was very, very difficult to get. So this 3D scanner would allow them to scan the area and scan the layer of bones that they were looking at, and then be able to excavate the bones out, and then it could scan the next layer. So we were able to have all of the information of each layer of bones in such like a complicated taphonomy here. So this is what it was like here. This is a camera in the puzzle box. This is what they're looking at right here, is the puzzle box with all of the bones. And another reason why this project was able to kind of move so quickly, and all of these bones were able to be excavated within a month, which is very quick, was because these bones were found in dirt. They're just lying on the surface. And even when they were in the puzzle box, they were just surrounded by dirt. This is very unique to hominin material in South Africa. Every other hominin site in South Africa, you have a situation like this, where you have hominin bones that are encased in a cement. We call this cement breccia, and we say that it's brecciated. And so these bones are like encased in this cement, and it's incredibly difficult to remove these bones from the cave. And this wasn't the case for Homo naledi. These bones were just in dirt. They were just laying about. So for example, this skeleton here, look at this beautiful skull. And look, this is the arm bone here. It's just waiting for us to study it, right? But this specimen, this is known as Littlefoot. And Littlefoot was discovered in '95. And we have still not seen a published paper from Littlefoot. One skeleton, one partial skeleton like this, and we still have not seen a published paper, which has been quite frustrating, but it gives you an example of how difficult it is to study this material when it's encased in this cement. This wasn't the case for Homo naledi, so they were able to move quite quickly with this project. So once the bones were removed from the cave, they were brought into the science tent. This is the science tent here. These bones were cataloged, covered in a lot of tissue paper, and then put into these individual boxes. When the project originally started, they thought that they had one skeleton, two skeletons. They bought one vault. They bought a couple things to hold all of these bones in. And then by the end of the month, they had over 1,700 bones and 5 vaults worth of fossil material. And so as soon as you have 1,700 bones, you have to become quite organized in your cataloging methods. So this is what the science tent became. And then throughout the entire process, which is just so cool, these excavators, these are 2 underground astronauts here, and this is a National Geographic guy, and so they are Skyping with schools all around the country. They Skyped with a school in Wisconsin, and they tried to do as much public outreach as possible every single night. With schools and universities, and they just tried to get out the information about Homo naledi and this caving experience and this entire excavation experience. They wanted to share it with the community. This is something that had never been done in paleoanthropology before, and it was quite exciting. So I thought this was really cool. This is just a lovely picture that my colleague Ellen took, one of the excavators. This is the chamber on the last day of excavation. So they had removed over 1,700 bones. This is within a month's time. But as you can see, so this is the puzzle box, and there are still bones in here. This is a femur sticking out. They had to keep it in there. They're like, this month is done. We'll go back and excavate later, which they have. They now have a full team excavating. But at the last day, they still had to keep bones in that puzzle box after they had removed so many. But this is, I just think, a beautiful picture of the chamber. Also, just very picturesque. Imagine the Homo naledi individuals in there. All right, so this is what we found. We found over 2,000 bones. Multiple elements of the skeleton were represented by multiple individuals, right? Once you have more than 2 thigh bones, then you have 2 individuals. You have multiple individuals. And so we knew immediately that there were many individuals in this site. This was, of course, this partial skeleton that was put together, but of course we don't know that these bones go together. This is just for the picture. But I mean, as you can see, we just have every part of the skeleton represented here multiple times, which has just been great. This is the largest fossil discovery in Africa by a factor of 2 now. Yeah, fossil hominin discovery. And again, we discovered these in the deep dark cave. I want you to keep that in mind. How did they get there? We have at least 15 hominins. We found anywhere from infants to elderly, and it really does have an unexpected combination of traits. So now I'm going to talk about how we studied this material after it came out of the cave. All right, so prior to Homo naledi, the field of paleoanthropology was run by a very small number of people. And this very small, very powerful, very powerful people, they had access to the sites that no one else had access to. They had access to the money, and therefore they had access to the fossils. And if you didn't know these people, then you didn't have access to the fossils. And usually, if they were to find fossil material, very few eyes would be on this fossil material before publication, which is fine, but the problem was, after publication, limited access to the fossils. No one else could study them. I mean, how many people have actually been able to see the famous Lucy skeleton? I know I haven't, right? And so this was the case. There was really limited access to the fossils. If you didn't know the right people, you would never touch a hominin bone. The field was run by a few people. And Rising Star wanted to change this completely. They wanted to just change the way that research was done in the field of paleoanthropology. They wanted to create a space for early career researchers to be able to be in this field and be able to become paleoanthropologists, which was really exciting. Because if you were an early career scientist before and you didn't have access to hominin bones, you were never going to get a job. You were never going to be able to write a dissertation about a species. So Rising Star wanted to change all of this, and they did. There was a call a couple months after the bones were all brought out of the cave. There was a call on Facebook also for early career scientists to go to South Africa, to go to the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa, and study this material for a 5-week-long workshop all about Homo naledi. They didn't know it was Homo naledi yet. And they considered early career scientists to be anyone who was in the midst of getting their PhD to all the way up to, like, they're in a tenure track position, but they have yet to receive tenure. So it was a wide kind of range of people, but they were thinking that these would be the individuals that would have the most unique data sets from all of their research collection. And really, they had the most to gain from being in this workshop, right? It would further their career the most by being in this workshop. So they had this international team. This is an international search, and they brought in an international team of early career scientists to be in the same room together and study the material and question each other and challenge each other and, like, do science, right? This is really exciting stuff. So this is in the vault at University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. So we have this vault that just contains just so many bones. These are all 8 bones here, and you can see that and it goes all the way around here. So this research, this workshop was in the vault at the Evolutionary Studies Institute at the university. It was a 5-week-long workshop, and they studied the bones. And this is where I came in too. There's me. So at this point, I had just gotten my master's, but I hadn't collected any of my data for my PhD. I didn't quite have a PhD topic yet. And so I was invited to go down to South Africa to document this experience, document the process of science that was occurring in this workshop. So my advisor is the co-leader of this project, and so that was quite handy. And so I went down to document what these early career scientists were doing, how you get a collection of bones and how it is that you come to a conclusion that it's a new species, right? I want to document this entire process because this has also not been done in paleoanthropology before. No one has ever documented this process, just like no one had ever documented the excavation process either. So this was just all a part of the increased amount of outreach and public education that we wanted to do for the Homo Naledi team. So here I am, documenting the process of science. This is the cranial team here. So each of the teams that were devoted to their specialized body part, right? We all study like one body part. Like there's some people who specialize in the teeth of hominins. There are other people that specialize in the shoulder or in the foot, right? And so they were broken up into these teams. And these teams dedicated to a specific body, part of the body. So this is the cranial team, and all of these women focus on the crania of hominins. There were some fun names to these groups, like the tooth team. They were in this like small little like booth in the corner, and so then they called their team the tooth booth. And then the hand team was Handland. So like they each had their own like, their own names. It was funny. All right. So, and then this is the lower limb team here. I don't know if they had a nice name. It's not as fun as Handland, but this is the lower limb team. And this is Pian Pian from China. This is Damiano Marchi from Italy, and then Chris Walker from Duke University. And they are all studying the femur here, the femora here. So these are a bunch of femurs, and they are comparing. Here we have all of the Homo naledi femora. We have a lot of the heads here of this big thigh bone, and they are trying to compare Homo naledi to all of the other fossil material that we've discovered, all of the other femora that we've discovered in the fossil record, and also compare it to humans and chimpanzees and gorillas. Try to figure out how Homo naledi is different, try to figure out how it is similar. This is like a backstage pass to science, really. This is it. So this is our cranial team, and I have a quick video of kind of just what it was like in the vault. So Mana here from Canada, she is going to show us the crania. We have two cranial pieces that they are studying in this video, and then she's also going to show us the first 3D printed cast, or 3D printed cast of Homo naledi that we created from these crania here. So you can see what just the you can just see what the what the energy was like in the vault, and you can kind of see people milling about, and it's kind of cool. Okay. Yeah. Got cranium 1. That's one. This is one. Look at that.
And then cranium 2 is this piece, which Heather has scanned and mirrored, and we now have a printed out calvarium and the frontal.
So that was it, right? This is the process of science. This is the first look at the skull of Homo naledi here. And as you can see, check out what is on their table here. The name of the game is comparative anatomy. And so we, basically they were comparing a lot of this cranial material to anything that has been discovered in the hominin fossil record previously. And also, like, here's a chimpanzee, and here's another ape mandible. So we're comparing it to everything we know and seeing how Homo naledi is different, seeing how Homo naledi is the same. And then this is another video, which we don't need sound for, just kind of showing you more of the room and like what it looks like with the multiple tables around where people are studying. And how they are comparing Homo naledi to this human skull here. Everyone working on their computers. We have the foot team there. And then how their table is just filled with cranial material. This is Davorka from Croatia, and then we have Mana from Vancouver. So, what did we find? This is Homo naledi here. So this is that cranium that Mana showed us in that video. Here it is. Homo naledi has a small brain size compared to humans. About 500 cc, a little bit larger than a chimpanzee. We are about 1200 cc's, so definitely smaller. Oh, this says average 1400, that's pretty big. And then this mandible here, we actually have these two pieces, this maxilla and mandible, that fit together. They fit together. You can tell it's like bite pattern, which is amazing. And these teeth are beautiful. So it has it has pretty human-like teeth. The premolars are a little bit different, but the teeth are definitely more similar to humans. And this skull here, we find that it's similar to Homo erectus in its general like shape and brow ridge here. But then in its overall size, it's more similar to kind of later Australopithecine species. So it's showing a mixture of kind of more primitive or ancestral traits versus more derived and more human-like traits. And we're going to see that throughout the entire skeleton here. Okay, oh, I love this hand so much. This hand was in articulation. Okay, it was just like lying there waiting to be discovered. It was just waiting. And this hand is beautiful. It has very modern proportions. So the lengths are similar to humans within these bones here. But the thumb is really long. The thumb is really long relative to the other fingers. So that's interesting. Also, this hand has curved phalanges, curved finger bones. So when we straighten out our hands, our fingers are straight and this is straight. When Homo naledi straightened out its hand, it would be like this. It would be unable to fully straighten out the hand because the finger bones were curved. We find this curvature in finger bones in chimpanzees, in orangutans, in gorillas. Curvature is due to use throughout a lifetime of grasping onto things. This is how your fingers get curved. So Homo naledi had curved fingers. This is something that humans do not have, but it had modern-like proportions, which is human-like. So curved fingers, really long thumbs help you grasp things. And this hand was in combination with a very primitive shoulder. This shoulder looks a lot like gibbons. So gibbons, lesser ape, swinging through the trees, completely arboreal. Homo naledi has a shoulder that looks exactly like that of a gibbon. So it's a gibbon-like shoulder with a really wide range of movement. So I can only go back this far. Gibbons can go back way further because their shoulder is responsible for swinging in the trees. So Homo naledi had a gibbon-like shoulder, curved fingers, but then a really long thumb and human-like proportions. So this is just more of that mosaic of traits that we've discovered in this species. This beautiful lower limb here, we have the femoral head and the thigh bone, and then we have this incredibly long shin bone. This shin bone is longer than in some humans, which is interesting. Longer and elongated lower limb allows you to take wider stride or longer strides, and it allows you to get to a place faster, and therefore we say that it's more efficient. And so this, so Homo naledi has the upper limb that shows these like arboreal or climbing features, but then the lower limb shows it was bipedal, it was an efficient biped, it was doing all the right things, right? Just like humans. So it's this combination of traits, which is really interesting. We also have the first associated juvenile lower limbs. So this is a juvenile. You can see that it hasn't fully developed yet. The growth plates are still there. But we have almost a complete length of the femur and of the tibia. So we were able to figure out the proportions of these, of this lower limb, which is something that we have never been able to do in the hominin fossil record. Oh, and then this foot. This foot is also very human-like. Look at this beautiful arch, just like we all have. And it's also human-like in its proportions. These toes are human-like in their length, so they're short toes. We have very short toes compared to chimpanzees or gorillas, right? We don't need our toes to grasp onto things, and so we've reduced the length of our toes. But Homo naledi has short toes, but it has curved toes, which is something that we don't have. So just like its hands, how its fingers are curved, the toes are also curved. And this curvature is occurring through grasping. So we really do believe that Homo naledi was an efficient walker, but also grasping and climbing. And there are a lot of rocks in South Africa that they could climb, right? So here we go. We put all the pieces together. We put the pieces of the puzzle together, if you will, and we come up with this. This is a partial skeleton. Of course, we don't know these bones belong to the same individual, but this is just to show you what the general shape and body size would look like for Homo naledi. It's about 5 foot tall, about 100 pounds, very long and lanky. So what I showed you is the morphology. And right now, we do not have a date for Homo naledi. The date is currently being worked out. But no matter the date, no matter if it is similar to more human-like and a closer up here, right? If it's more recent, like 200,000 years, if it's here, or if it's 2 million years down here, it doesn't change the morphology. It doesn't change the features that I've showed you, right? It would change the way that we would draw a few of these branches maybe, but it could just be a branch here around 2 million years, and it could be a branch here around 200,000 years. It really does not change the morphology. And that was something that they really wanted to focus on with Homo naledi. They didn't want the date to come first, because immediately people start making assumptions. As soon as you put a date on it, you start making assumptions about what it's doing, why it's there, how closely related is it to Homo sapiens. And they really did not want to do the date first because they wanted the morphology to speak for itself. So they are now dating the species and also looking for DNA, just in case. Because you don't know if it's old or young, you want to check to make sure that you're checking all your boxes, so we're going to check for DNA as well. So to compare the just kind of a quick demonstration of how we study Homo naledi versus how we've studied other species in the past. Because with Homo naledi, we have 1,700 fossil fragments, and we're comparing it to these partial skeletons that we've previously discovered in the hominin record. But I want to quickly give you a demonstration of what would happen if we were to find one, right? Instead of 2,000 bones, what if we just found one? And if we just had found this one tooth, and it was similar to hominin 2 or hominin 3, we wouldn't really know where to put it, right? In good conscience, we couldn't say that it belonged to either hominin 2 or hominin 3 because it looks like both. So we can't properly assign this tooth to anything. If we have more material, though, if we have like a pelvis and a tooth, and it looks more like hominin 3 in this case, then we can properly identify these fragments to a specific hominin species. We basically have the exact opposite problem of Homo naledi. We have the case where we have a bunch of fragmentary material. This is all unassociated material. And we're comparing it to a few hominin skeletons. It's almost like we're inundating the fossil record with all of this fragmentary material. And all this fragmentary material, it looks like Australopithecines or it looks like Homo. And so it's difficult to know where to put the bones or if it should be Homo or Australopithecus based on all of these bones. So having more bones does not actually simplify your problems of assigning it to a species. And these are the partial skeletons that we are comparing to Homo naledi. Or that we are comparing Homo naledi to, I should say. There are a few more. The other partial skeletons in this hominin record are less complete. So these are the most complete hominin partial skeletons that we have in the record. And they're beautiful, don't get me wrong. They're beautiful, but we do not have a lot of them. We're quite limited. And these partial skeletons give us a lot of information about one individual, right? So, so I'm going to briefly talk about Homo naledi, or the limb proportions of Homo naledi, which is what I just recently studied. When we are interested in limb proportions here, we can study them in these partial fossil records, or partial skeletons. We can study the limb proportions because we have the upper limbs and the lower limbs. But when we are trying to figure out the limb proportions, or if we're trying to figure out any proportion in this unassociated assemblage, it gets quite difficult to do because none of the bones belong to each other or belong to the same individual. And we care about limb proportions because we actually see a huge difference in limb proportions between the great apes and humans. Humans, we have incredibly long lower limbs and we have short arms, we have long legs, right? Orangutans, here, Pongo, have incredibly long arms and really short legs. And they have these long arms because they are in the trees. They are suspensory brachiators, right? They're in the trees. They don't need long legs. And so they have long arms. They also have large joint surfaces in their arms because all of their force to move their body through space, all of their force is being moved through their upper limb, through their arm, and not their leg. Whereas humans, we only use our feet to move through any given space, and so our lower limb is longer, and we also have really large lower limb joints, okay? So we can actually study the limb proportions of these species and be able to determine something about locomotion, how they're moving throughout space. Or climate adaptation, we can tell something about the behavior. So we're interested in limb proportions for these reasons. And we want to know what the limb proportions are for Homo naledi because the upper limb demonstrates that it was climbing, but the lower limb demonstrates that it was like humans and it was walking. So we were interested to know if the joint sizes tell the same story. Like, does Homo naledi have longer arms or larger joints in the upper limb? Or does it have larger joints in the lower limb, just like humans? How is Homo naledi moving on the landscape, right? So we can study the joint surfaces of the upper limb and the joint surfaces of the lower limb, and we can study this in Homo naledi. And this is just briefly, when we have, I hope this works. oh no, oh yeah. When we have multiple bones for the upper limb and multiple bones for the lower limb, we can just study the joint sizes, or we can study the ends of the limbs here. We can study them for the femur, or we can study them for the lower limb. We could also study them for the upper limb. So what I did was I studied, I just wanted to know the relative size, the relative limb size in Homo naledi. I wanted to know if the arms were larger than the legs or the legs were larger than the arms. Figure out how it moved on the landscape. So what I did was I collected all of the joint sizes of the upper limb, or the diaphyses, or the shafts, the sizes of the shafts, right? Because that also would tell us something about force through the limb. So I just tried to measure the sizes of the lower limb, and then the joint sizes, the size of the upper limb, and then the size of the lower limb. And this gave me like an upper limb size and a lower limb size. And I was able to complete like a relative size limb index. And this told us that Homo naledi has the same proportions as humans. They do not have larger upper limbs than their lower limbs. So their climbing behaviors that we've seen in their shoulder and their arm and their hands are not changing the limb proportions of this species. So Homo naledi is an effective climber. We now know that it's an effective climber, but it has the limb proportions of humans. So yet again, this is a very mosaic skeleton. It has these curved fingers, which we would consider as being quite primitive. Long thumbs, which we know is derived, just like ours, we have long thumbs. Very small teeth like humans. Small pelvis, I didn't talk about this, but it's more primitive. Very thin arm bones, also that gorilla or the gibbon-like shoulder, which is very primitive. Very thin femur, which is more like humans, but with a small brain and a very small brow ridge. So this skeleton, these skeletons, Homo naledi, is a completely unique set of mosaic traits. And it was unlike anything that we had discovered in the fossil record, and therefore we named it a new species. And then, of course, there was this very provocative hypothesis. I haven't talked about how they got into the cave. Okay? I left this to last because this leads to the best discussion and the best questions about how did they get into the cave. This was the National Geographic image of this. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But we think that they were intentionally depositing these bodies. This hypothesis has not been proven wrong yet. People are still testing it. But as of right now, we cannot come up with another way that 15 individuals got into this cave without being intentionally deposited there. This is what we know so far. So we don't know how they got into the cave, but this is what we don't know, or this is what we do know, right? So there are 15 individuals, all ages. They had to all get back there. They entered at different times, so they weren't all deposited at the same time. There's dirt in between the layers of bones. So there were multiple deposition events. There are no other animals in this site. There are no carnivore marks. It's not like a leopard was moving these bodies into the caves and gnawing on them and then leaving their cache, right? No carnivore tooth marks on the bones, no other animals. We found like 2 bird bones in the cave. That was it. There were no other rodents. There was nothing else besides hominin bones. That's it, right? And there's no more evidence for living in the cave. If hominins are living in the cave, they usually leave behind trash, as we all do when we're living somewhere. There's no evidence that they're living in the cave. We don't find anything. We just find the hominin bones. They're deep in the dark zone. We think that they were using fire. They had to be. They had to be able to see in that area. It's a dark zone. They would have been going in blind. And this was a very dangerous path to go down. So, because there were no other entrances. So it wasn't like that there was an entrance in the chamber itself and it was covered over. The only way to get into the Naledi chamber is through the Superman's crawl and the dragon's back and down the chute. We don't think that the hominins were going all the way down into the chute. We think that they were going up the top of dragon's back and just depositing the bodies over the edge, because we found bones all the way along the edge and then pooled in this puzzle box. So it was like they just decomposed and then just collected in the puzzle box there. So as of right now, we do not have any other we don't have any other way of these hominins getting into the caves except for intentional body deposition. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And lastly, I just want to say that all of this material is open access, which has just been really exciting. All of the scans of the Homo naledi bones are up on a site called Morphosource, and you can 3D print them anywhere. A library which has 3D printing. You can print all of the material, and it is quality material. You could take measurements from it. And so unlike Lucy, whose skeleton I will never see, we have all of this material, and it's available for the public. It's also available for other researchers, and we want as many people as possible to study this material. So you can print out your own. And I leave this as a question mark because is it the end? We found more bones. So stay tuned, because there are more bones in this cave. So, yeah. All right. Thank you.
One of the early slides showed this articulated skeleton with all of them.
Yeah.
And there were some arranged in a circle. Are those just teeth that you decoratively arranged, or are they necklaces?
No, they're teeth, and those the teeth show the upper teeth and the lower teeth. So the upper jaw and the lower jaw. Yeah, yep. So the reason that we know that there are 15 individuals is because there are 15 sets of dentitions. There are 15 sets of teeth. And so teeth are always our best indicator of the number of individuals in a site. And so there are 15 of those dental arcades.
There are no cultural artifacts?
No cultural artifacts whatsoever. No stone tools, no evidence of fire in that area, nothing.
Next question. Right here. How in the world did you get all those bones out? Every time they traveled back and forth, did they take a little bag of bones?
Yeah, I took a lot of trips. It's like the never-ending grocery trip, right? It's like, oh my God. So they had these, they had just had bags. They were waterproof bags, and they would collect the bones, and then they'd wrap them in tissue paper and put them in a Tupperware container. Tupperware, I mean, come on. Tupperware is so useful. Tupperware container, and then the Tupperware containers were put into a bag, and the bag had to be, less than 10 inches. and then they would just scooch it through, like Superman scholars, like push the bag, carefully. So yeah, they were able to. It took a lot of trips, but they were able to pack a lot of Tupperware containers in that bag and then bring it out. Yes.
How large was the puzzle box, and how much is left?
Yeah, so the puzzle box is less than a square meter in size, 25 inches in depth, and as far as I know, they have completely excavated the puzzle box. There are no more bones in that chamber. Did I give it away? There are more bones. Did I say that? Yes. Yeah.
Is it possible that would there be any evidence of disease or anything?
Oh yes, pathology, disease. We do not have evidence of pathology, as far as I know. It wasn't like they were really, these bones were like abnormal in any way. The older bones just showed signs of wear. But even like the infants didn't show signs of pathology, as far as I know. Yes?
So is it assumed that this was a burial chamber? I mean, were they delivered there post-mortem, or were they put there when they were alive?
Well, we think that it was post-mortem. We think that they were dead when they were kind of put into the chamber. It doesn't show any signs of like living there or any signs of any individuals like living in that area, and so we think that they were dead when they got there, when the bones got there. Yeah, because they were decomposing along the side of the chute, and then they'd fall into the chamber. So there was never evidence of hominins living there. So yeah.
I find your love affair with these bones absolutely exciting, but I do have to ask if you've considered counseling.
Thank you. Yeah. Ha! Ha!
Good answer.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
And let me just give you 2 questions, right?
Yes.
One of them is there no assumption that the cave, the physical characteristics of the cave have changed over the last however many millennia we're talking about? And the second question is, how did the last person get out?
All right, so the geologists have been working tirelessly to try to find another entrance, try to figure out if the chamber itself changed at all or was any different or space. They think that the Superman crawl was not always 10 inches. They think that. But they do know that there's only one entrance into that chamber, and it's up Dragon's Back. That has not changed. They think that Superman's crawl got narrower. The chamber itself does not have another entrance, and they have checked 3 times, a bazillion times. They are confirmed about that. And then the second question was, how does the last researcher? So the last researcher gets out. The caver gets out the last. The professional caver follows them. I know. Yeah, he actually, one of the cavers dislocated, Rick Hunter, he dislocated his shoulder, kind of having to go through that chute so many times. But like, cavers love that, like they're all about it.
Did your openness and all of this make you highly unpopular with other paleontologists?
Yeah. Yeah, it's been, I think that there has been a lot of pushback because there was a way of doing things, and everything's all mixed up now. And so those researchers in Ethiopia that have never shared a bit of their work or have never made fossils available to anyone else, I think people are starting to question that more, and it brought their behaviors to light. And so there is pushback. Unfortunately, those are also the people that are like peer reviewing your literature, So like this is an evolving process, and Homo Naledi's really, or like the team is really pushing back on the way it used to be done. So hopefully the other teams will be more open to sharing more of their work. But yeah, I mean, not everyone loves the Rising Star team, because of that. So.
There's a question here.
Yeah. Oh.
How many species of man-like creatures has your field found?
Not too many. It's always like we're finding new species, but there aren't really that many. There's Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo floresiensis, which is that species that's like 14,000 years old in Indonesia, Homo sapiens, and then we have this successive couple species in Europe that lead up to the Neanderthals. But in Africa, we have Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and then Homo sapiens. So not very many.
You showed through your pictures how the bones were found in dirt.
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
And some right on the surface.
Yep.
So how did they theorize that they were fossilized, and to what extent are they bones, and to what extent are they fossilized?
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
Right. So I will say that these bones are the cortical surface, the tops of the bones just kind of flake off. They're very chalky. They're not fossilized. They're very delicate. They just kind of turn to dust, which is also another reason why 3D prints and scans are so important, is because if you want to look at a certain element, you can actually look at the 3D print rather than the bone, because they are falling apart in our hands. They just kind of they just become chalk-like. It was a little wet in that cave too, so they were a little wet. They weren't fossilized. So that should give you an idea of what kind of time period we're looking at. Yeah?
Talk about the other bones that are still there.
In the chamber?
Yeah.
So there, as far as I know, all of the bones in the chamber are out now. So there's now over like 2,500 bones in this collection. All of the bones are out of the chamber, but we found new bones in another part of the cave. Yeah. So look for that.
What kind of things have the public contributed to your understanding of the skeletons that you have? I mean, you made it available for people to see.
Yeah.
You had input that's been useful in terms of understanding what you got?
Oh, that's a good question. I actually don't know. I would hope that there would be some people that are emailing John or Lee and talking to them about what they think. No one has contacted me, and I haven't discussed this with John actually. If any of the if any insights have come from the public, that's a great question. I don't know, but I'm sure there have been, right? Yeah.
You're saying that the chamber that you found the bones in, that is not necessarily in the end of the cave system?
So the cave system is very large. So what the question was, is the chamber the end of the cave system? And the Rising Star cave system is quite large, and the Naledi chamber is the end of that one route, but there are other ways to go in that chamber, and so they are now looking everywhere in the Rising Star cave system. They're looking everywhere in that system for more bones. Yeah. But the chamber is the end point for that specific route.
Can you explain the difference between hominin and hominid?
Yeah, this is a term that has changed actually within the past like 20 years. Hominid used to be human and our ancestors, and then, but then it was changed. So hominin, I-N, is humans and our ancestors. So any ancestor that's on our line. So that's hominin, and then hominid is all of our ancestors and chimpanzees and all of chimpanzees' ancestors. So, and then hominoid is all of the great apes, humans included, and their ancestors. So hominin, hominid, hominoid. Ugh, I know. I know.
Where did the term, is the chamber is called D. Naledi.
Yeah.
And it's Homo Naledi.
Yeah.
What does Naledi mean, and is it a native term?
It is. Yeah, it is a native term. Naledi means star in Soto, which is a local language there. Yeah, so means star, rising star. It fits really well. A lot of the new sites or new species names or anything is really based on kind of local culture rather than more Western names or whatever given to them. Yeah, so that's a good thing that has changed in our field, kind of recognizing the local culture more. Yeah.
Have you had any feedback or demonstrations or anything from people that don't believe in evolution?
Oh, I'm sure that there has been a lot of it. A lot of it is online, of course. I haven't personally had a lot of feedback at talks about it. Usually people don't go to the talks. But yeah, I mean, there's some feedback like online about it, and I'm sure people have contacted, talks or something. But yeah, they haven't contacted me, which is good. But there will always be feedback.
Does Madison have a further role in this, or did it end with you?
That's it. We're done. The dissertation was written. That's it. No, so John Hawks is, the reason John Hawks couldn't be here tonight is because he's in South Africa on sabbatical working on the Homo Naledi material. Yeah, so he will continue to be involved in the project, and this will continue to be co-led by Lee Berger and John Hawks. And there's a long history of the University of Wisconsin-Madison working with the University of Witwatersrand, and so there's always been kind of that connection there. So we continue to collaborate with them, and I don't see that ending anytime soon. Yeah, yep, yeah. So Wisconsin.
Does anybody want to ask the last question? Or is
Ooh,
that it?
a lot of pressure.
One more.
Now that you're finishing your PhD, are you going to be getting a real job?
Yes, yes, I will. I am proud to say that I have a job. So I will be hired by the School of Medicine and Public Health at UW-Madison to teach human anatomy. Aww. Yeah, so I'm a TA there now in the anatomy team, and they want to hire me on full time. So biological anthropologist, because we study human evolution, we have to know human anatomy, and we have to know how it evolved. And so a lot of biological anthropologists these days, because you're right, there aren't that many jobs in anthropology in academia. A lot of biological anthropologists get hired to teach anatomy at medical schools or at DO schools. So it's a very good opportunity for us to do that and be able to do our research as well and teach.
Let's give Sarah another